So before starting, I want to also thank the Kamloops Art Gallery team. It's the second time that the Musée d'Art de Joliette works with the CAG. And we did another exhibition here a couple of years ago with Adadana, and it's always a wonderful experience to work with such an incredible team. So thank you so much for having worked on this project with me and with Jin-me. So the Musée d'Art de Joliette has organized this touring exhibition in 2019. It was open prior to the pandemic in Quebec, and it toured in Quebec for 5 different stops. And this is the 6th stop. We are very happy to work here, but also I'm especially happy that Jin-me could make it this time because she couldn't see the other versions of this exhibition. So this is very special for me to have her back with me and see the exhibition. I wanted to start with this project, with this work, which is Souvenirs of the Self, because it introduces well the exhibition that we worked on together. So this first retrospective of Jin-me Yoon is looking at over almost 30 years of practice with works like this one that she made in the 90s up till work that she made in 2021. So it's really going through her whole career. And this work is very special because it's one of the first ones that I saw of Jin-me when I was working on her practice during my master's degree. So this is also a reason why this exhibition feels very special to me. So Souvenirs of the Self was made at while she was doing a residency at the BAM Center in the 90s. And this is a good example of how she questioned then her integration into the Canadian landscape. So dealing with her experience of immigration coming from Korea, arriving in Canada in 1968. She grew up here, and then she did her master in Montreal and came back to BC to teach at the Emily Carr University. But before teaching in Vancouver, she did this work in residency, placing herself against a very specific landscape that we associate, the Rocky Mountains, that we associate to the Canadian landscape. And with this project where she poses exactly doing the same body pose in every places she went to around the Rocky Mountains, without smiling, without like fitting with the group of people, the tourists that were there. She asks the question, how does she fit in this landscape, and how does her body is read against this landscape? Is she a tourist? Is she a Canadian citizen? These are the kind of questions that she raised with this work. These images were first made as postcards that we see in the exhibition space also. So they weren't at first distributed as artworks. They were disseminated through tourist shops. And this is an example of an infiltration practice that she did again with other works after that. So when we go in the exhibition space, you'll see that there's the Longview series that she made in 2017 that also exists as postcards. Both works are shown as postcards and as photographs in the exhibition space, and you'll also find the Souvenirs of the Self postcards in the exhibition space. And I wanted to start with this one because you see that her presence is central in the images, and this will change as her practice evolve through time. So this exhibition, for this retrospective, we focused on thematics instead of organizing it chronologically. But then this is the oldest work in the exhibition, and we start with this one because we wanted it to, Jin-me and I discussed it a lot, but we wanted this to be outside of the gallery space to echo the first way that the work existed, which is as postcards that weren't in exhibition spaces. So let's go inside, follow me through the hallway, and we'll meet in the gallery, in the center of the gallery space. And be aware while you walk of the 3 first images of the long view series. So you might have seen the long view images while coming in the central space. So keep those images in mind, and I'll speak about those in a moment. So I was, and Jin-me just corrected me. So she went to Emily Carr, but she teaches at Simon Fraser, which is very important to correct. So to continue, the first images that she made in her practice, she traveled across Canada doing projects with the Rocky Mountains in Banff, also on Prince Edward Island in Charlottetown. She also went to the Stampede in Calgary. So she went to different iconic places in Canada and photographed herself against these landscapes to question how she fits with these landscapes and to question the way that we represent identity and read identity. So the first image that you saw in the long view series is her looking out to the sea with binoculars, and this image comes back a few times through either video work or photographs, and it shows that central to her practice is questioning the way that we see and the way that we look and the way that we read what we see. And this is very central to her thinking and her practice, at least at that time during these early years of questioning the way that she portrays identity. When she was doing those works in Prince Edward Island and Banff, and so she worked with her family a lot. And this is something that, while we worked on this retrospective, became very evident. So the idea was not, at the beginning, her family was very central to her images, but not necessarily as her family per se, but as a family. And then, since they are still represented in her work, and we see her children aging through time, and also her husband, and also her mother and her father, we recognize those faces, and then it becomes about her family also, which makes it very personal, also, the work. And this is something that became central to the way that we thought about this exhibition, and these groupings of work speaks about that. So we see here Rest, an image from 2012, where there's her son and her daughter lifting her, and she's horizontal to the ground near a tree in a beautiful landscape. And we see that the relationship between the background and the figures changed suddenly. So in Souvenirs of the Self, the background was important as a landscape, but the figure was the central focus. And suddenly, the more the work changed, and this is another example of Living Time from 2019, the more the figure becomes small, and the landscape is what becomes more prominent. So the focus of her work changed, and I see in that the idea of our interconnectedness to nature. And so from the idea of family being central, then we move to the idea, so connection between siblings and the love between siblings. We move to works that honor also our connections to nature. And this is something that became very prominent and that announces also the direction of her new work. So we see this in Living Time, and also in the video that we won't move in that direction because there's not enough space, but please have a look at Other Hauntings. It's made in Korea, on Jeju Island, and it's a very important place where there's a sacred rock called Gorumbi that disappeared under a naval base that the Americans built on Korea. And we hear that what we hear right now, if you can, if it's a young man singing to the rock underwater. So a sacred song that is addressed to the rock. So again, paying respect to the land and paying respect to nature. And this is another recent work from 2016. We can also speak about the other works that are in this space. So it is that, a diptych that is in the collection of the Kamloops Art Gallery. This is also why it was very special for us to show the retrospective here, because Jin-me made a body of work in Kamloops in the early 2000s, video work and photographs, a body of work called Unbidden. And this is in the collection of the gallery. And here, from that same body of work, this is Channel, filmed in Paul Lake, if I'm not mistaken. I don't see Jin-me right now, but I think it's in Paul Lake. And she's floating on in the river. She's disappearing underwater. It's very airy, as if she's sort of a ghost presence, because there's a play with the transparency of her body in the water. And here it's the same idea of her being reflected, looking up and looking down in the diptych. And we paired these three works. When I was saying we chose to do this retrospective thematically instead of chronologically. So these works are from the early 2000s, and this one is 2012. We paired them because it's formally they're echoing each other, because it's about the body floating in air or in the water. So thinking about the different meanings of the same motif. And it is that, and in Channel, and the whole series of Unbidden, Jin-me moved on to think about also her heritage and her history connection to Korea. So the first body of works that she made were really about her connection to Canada and how she fit the landscape in Canada. And then she started questioning her heritage and also transmission of all the stories related to her family in Korea and her own experience also in Korea. And these specific works, this one in particular, speaks of a story that she heard that the soldiers during the war were shooting the bodies that were floating in the river. So echoing that, she made a series of works echoing those stories. And with this series of works, she started really to question the memory embedded in specific sites and specific places. And this is what we can see in the other room. So we might move in the video room just there, and I'll follow you there. So you might recognize this site, which is the same site that we see in the long view photographs that are in the hallway. So it's a beach on Vancouver Island. It's called Long Beach. And Jin-me did a series of work there in 2017, part of a project called Repère Landmark. She was invited and commissioned to do new works. And on that beach, near that site, there's a monument for honoring the soldiers who participated in the Korean War. The Canadian soldiers, and the mound that we see on the beach, the size of the mound echoes that monument. So Jin-me sees that mound as it reminds her of a funerary, a burial mound, so a funeral ritual. And you'll see once the video, there are different temporalities to this video. So the site is a very touristic site because it's a beautiful beach. It's looking across the ocean. It's looking in the direction of Korea, and there's the monument to the veterans of the Korean War, but there's also an army base not too far from that site, and so the area was a military area also. So Jin-me, with the soldiers that you'll see that will appear, voila, in the video, she addresses the memory of that site or the different histories of that site. So it's a touristic site, but it's also a former military site. And we see all those soldiers coming out of the ground as if they are going in all directions, and they become, as in the channel video, a bit transparent, as if they are ghosts. So it speaks of the memory of that place. And we paired this video, which is called Testing Ground, with this installation, As It Is Becoming, that Jin-me made in 2006 and 2008 in Japan and in Korea. So she's crawling on the ground, as you'll see in the different videos. She's crawling on the ground in Seoul and in Beppu in Japan. So this is a performance that she made for the camera. It's very difficult physically, and it's also, it puts her in a very vulnerable position, being so close to the street and also to cars. Sometimes you'll see in this image she crosses the street, so she's very vulnerable. But also changing the perspective, so the way we look, crawling on the ground, she becomes so close to the ground. She looks like an insect also somehow, and it echoes the soldiers here coming out of the le trou, coming out of the ground, and walking in all directions and not communicating between each other. They look a little bit like insects also suddenly, because like ants. They look like ants going in all directions. And this, so As It Is Becoming, was made as a way for Jin-me to get closer to the experience of trauma from the war. So Japan occupied Korea, and then that occupation stopped with the Second World War. And Jin-me's family experienced all of that, and the places where she, so Beppu in Japan, there's thermal springs there that were that used to be helping people to heal from the radiation from the bomb in Japan. And in Seoul, after the Second World War, so when the occupation of Korea stopped, then the city became very, economically, the city became more well, the economy of Seoul boomed. So we see a different power dynamic between the two countries that changed. And she, by doing these crawlings in these different places, she's also putting herself through a very difficult experience. And by doing that, she wants to honor the suffering of the involved in the wars, and getting closer to the trauma that people experience. So instead of choosing to represent those ideas, she chooses to experience those ideas through these works. And I don't, Jin-me, maybe you wanted to add something about these works?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm going to burst into song here, but I won't. I chose for Anne-Marie as a curator. She's exceptional. She's known my work for so long to speak. And I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. But yes, you'll see that my work travels through many different, phases, because I feel like when I make the work, there are certain kinds of questions. I don't really have answers, but I ask questions. And then after I make the work and go through the process, I feel like it's kind of come out of my body and it's in the world. So, and then there's a new thing that is something that I want to touch to try to explore that. So you'll see that there's different phases in my work, and this one I think came from partially working in a certain way with photography and the idea of the image, and coming to a certain limit with that way of working. So 1991, Souvenirs of the Self, and then onwards. And then I decided that I would really try to experience a kind of embodied relationship to many of the things that were haunting histories of particularly the traumatic histories of 20th century Korea through Japanese colonialism, and then of course the Korean War and military dictatorship, and on to, and then we have the nice new shiny Seoul, the city that is, now people know it more in terms of K-pop and Korean dramas, which are great. So that's what you see, is just to say that my work comes from a relationship to my own making, of course, with other people, other artists, other ideas. But it is, you'll see that it's a process of me enacting those questions, whether it's through photography in terms of images, or through video, and I had to go to video so that the viewers could be in time with me. They're very, very related, but different mediums. So I'm happy to take any questions at the end, but I think Anne-Marie is doing a terrific job. And thank you. But I just thought from the artist's point of view, why I make the works and why you see such a difference in the way I work. That's why, because when you make the work and you're inside of it, the process then leads to other processes, and then it leads to different works. And I feel very privileged to be an artist that way, that you can be inside of something and to respond to the world, because very much like our honored elder here today, it is for the love of the world and for the love of community, and doing things honestly and truthfully, but to do it in a way that brings us also together, because this is also a shared experience of what we're going through in the world today as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe to answer or to continue on what Jin-me was saying, that this work came out of experiencing sort of a limit to a way of working that she was then especially doing in photography, where she question the stereotypes associated with representation of Asian identity through unbidden theory, for example, and through the, the, um, the work that I described before, and also the stereotypes associated to Canadian identity also. So after questioning all of these in terms of the representation of the images, then she went on to focus more on experiencing and performance for the camera. So this is the switch in her practice. And the last work that we see in the exhibition is in the other video room. So if you want to join me in the other video room, we can talk about that work too. So this is the most recent work made by Jin-me in 2021. It's called Dreaming Birds Know No Borders, and it shows images filmed in Korea and also images from Maple Woods filmed near Vancouver, well, in North Vancouver. And it's the images coming from Korea are coming from an old VHS cassette that tells the true story of a family that was divided between the north and the south of Korea because of war. So the father, an ornithologist, stayed in the north, and the rest of the family was in the south, and they communicated through birds because they could communicate by sending messages through with the birds. And we see also a dancer doing a traditional Korean dance, the crane dance, in the water near Vancouver. And we also see someone looking through binoculars, so that reference that I was telling you about at the beginning comes back in this work too. And when that person is looking through the binoculars, they're looking across the demilitarized zone dividing the south and the north of Korea, and it's a large zone that was turned into an ecological park, well, sort of a park where the nature and different species are protected. And when we spoke about this work, Jin-me and I, one of the things that struck me is how from such a traumatic experience, war and the division of Korea, it turned out that that demilitarized zone is one of the place where there's so many species that are protected. So there's something positive out of that conflict also by the existence of that zone. And it points to that turn that I was saying in Jin-me's work, looking more and more at the sea and the trees and nature as something that we need to take care of and that we are responsible for also. And with the works where we see a lot of water, this becomes very evident also because the water connects us because it flows through us. It's not just a place where we are, but it constitutes us, so we have a different kind of responsibility towards water and nature when we think about it in that way, as something that makes us. And this is something that we've talked about a lot.
I just want to give a little bit of background. The degraded VHS footage was given to me by an elderly woman in Toronto. I went to go meet her when I was doing research, and she received that VHS tape that she'd been very much well, she valued it so much, but she stored it in a way that it was degraded, you know, all the magnetic fallout was happening. And so that film was smuggled out of North Korea and given to her in the 90s on VHS, and she kept it because it was a true story of her grandfather, who was an ornithologist in North Korea. And he, like Anne-Marie said, they were separated. And it's a very long tale, but the North Korean film, you can even see it now on YouTube, was originally very much in the melodrama genre. So there's a very, very like involved story told kind of, you know, in a feature film, big way about North Korea. And this is actually the Unification Tower looking at the DMZ to North Korea. So what I have to say about that is that for me, the story was very compelling, but I also wanted to take all the people out because the story had been told, and she had told it to some journalists, and it was out there. And what I wanted to do is kind of touch poetically the loss. And so there's a lot of over-the-top symphonic music and classical music employed in the film, the original North Korean film. So what I did is I took that classical music and I slowed it down, and then I played it backwards so you have a kind of elegy for loss. So here, that's original footage, but of course it's so degraded. It doesn't look like that. It's you know. And then I wanted to connect the diasporic experience of this idea of borders and boundaries, and of course birds do fly over borders. And in the actual film version, you know, the father goes to the border to chase some birds that he's been wanting to find as an ornithologist, but they fly over, and just like his family's on the other side. So that's where this work comes from, and why the footage looks like the way it does, and where the sound comes from, and then connecting it to Tsleil-Waututh lands, which were very much polluted, and it's industrial brown lands that have been reclaimed as important estuary spaces, conservation spaces, and the Tsleil-Waututh are very, very involved in that. So it's honoring these histories of these unceded lands that are being stewarded and have been stewarded in time immemorial by the Indigenous peoples. And I want to know how we can also be present here as immigrants in relation to that, and to honor that, and also have a planetary relationship to, like I said, the current situation that we're in, especially around climate change. So more and more my work is going in that direction. And I think that's to honor the differences, but also to stress the commonality of how we do have to come together. And I know that given all the wildfires and what we've gone through, that that you feel this deeply here, and that we all have. Unfortunately, BC was the poster child of climate change, and so yeah, it's just my heart out to the world, and that's why I made this piece. And the birds are so beautiful, so beautiful. And the young man does the crane dance, which is a modified form. So it's about how to relearn traditional dances, but yet I'm not really interested in recreating it authentically per se. I'm more interested in how the embodiment can be translated in a new way, in a new place, and honoring the lands and the waters.
So that's it. Thank you so much. And please,
I'd like to just thank Anne-Marie. She's an amazing colleague. She knows my work so well, has done such a superb job, and also Charo. Charo and I have been colleagues for a long, long time, and just amazing. And I'm sorry that Margaret's not here, but also to the staff of the Kamloops Art Gallery. You've done a superb job. I'm so moved. And yeah, I know how much work it is, how much hard work it is. And thank you to all of you for coming out and supporting the gallery. And you know, art can't do everything, but certainly art can do certain things, which we all obviously want to keep supporting. So thank you very much.